Well, as a matter of fact, I didn't say it. And I don't want to waste a whole lot of time on this because this is what Donald Trump and maybe some of the media want. Anybody knows me, knows that it's incomprehensible that I would think that a woman could not be president of the United States. Go to YouTube today. There's a video of me 30 years ago talking about how a woman could become president of the United States. In 2015, I deferred, in fact, to Senator Warren. There was a movement to draft Senator Warren to run for president. And you know what? I stayed back. Senator Warren decided not to run, and I did run afterwards. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by 3 million votes. How could anybody in a million years not believe that a woman could become president of the United States? And let me be very clear. If any of the women on this stage or any of the men on this stage win the nomination, I hope that's not the case. I hope it's me. But if they do, I will do everything in my power to make sure that they are elected in order to defeat the most dangerous president in the history of our country.
So, Senator Sanders, I do want to be clear here. You're saying that you never told Senator Warren that a woman could not win the election.
That is correct.
Senator Warren, what did you think when Senator Sanders told you a woman could not win the election?
I disagreed. Bernie is my friend, and I am not here to try to fight with Bernie. But look, this question about whether or not a woman can be president has been raised, and it's time for us to attack it head on. And I think the best way to talk about who can win is by looking at people's winning record. So, can a woman beat Donald Trump? Look at the men on this stage. Collectively, they have lost 10 elections. The only people on this stage who have won every single election that they've been in are the women.
All right, I think that was probably the most noteworthy moment during the debate. However, afterwards, there was apparently an exchange with Senator Sanders and Warren. He went to shake her hand. She had some words for him. Very ugly between these two right now.
I watched it in the middle of the break, and basically the way that it worked was, I think we have a voiceover of the actual moment in which this happened. And no, we don't have it. Okay, I'm being told. So basically, the way it worked was Bernie went to go shake her hand. Then she kind of backed off this way. There was a tense kind of confrontation. Tom Steyer was weirdly lurking in the background. And then the handshake didn't happen. And Bernie ultimately threw up his hands, and they both walked off the stage. So, it was a very tense moment there. And a lot of body language experts will be on CNN tomorrow to tell us what
was exactly going on there. Yeah, and I'm sure the campaigns will, try to spin it to their benefit.
Right.
I have to say, look, who are the voters who have been floating around during this process? You've had Biden's base relatively solid. Right. You've had Bernie's base relatively solid. And there's been a lot of fluctuation of essentially white affluent liberals moving from candidate to candidate to candidate. You had Kamala had a moment. You had Pete had a moment. You had Warren have a moment. You had Pete. You're back to Warren seems to be taking a little bit away from Pete. Look, the media loved Warren's performance tonight.
They did.
She's getting glowing reviews. And who does the media speak directly into the hearts of that white affluent liberal base? So I don't think it's Bernie Sanders who ultimately is hurt by this. I actually think it's Pete. I think they share such a similar pool of voters. I think those are the voters who are most up for grabs. If you look at the polling, their coalitions are the least sort of solid and the least set. So especially since Pete had a relatively unremarkable night, I think this could actually be kind of a damaging moment for him. I think Warren could see a bump from his voters.
It's going to be interesting.
Indeed. All right, let's bring in the panel with the best insights around Team Rising. Tonight's special debate edition includes Democratic strategist Andrew Feldman, assistant professor of political science at Howard University, Kenesha Grant, senior policy analyst at the Independent Women's Forum, Inez Stepman, and Democratic strategist and council member at large in Montgomery County, Maryland, Will Jawando. Great to see you guys all.
Great to see you guys.
Thank you.
Good to be here.
Kenesha, let me start with you first. What did you make of the whole Bernie Warren situation, in particular that moment when the CNN moderator Bernie Sanders had just said, "I didn't say that," and she turns around and says, "Well, when Bernie did say that thing, he didn't say that he said. How did you feel about it?" It was a very unfair framing ultimately.
Your viewers are going to be in my mentions heavy because I believe Warren. Like, I think she's telling the truth. I don't think she has any reason to be making up stories about what Bernie did or didn't say. I think we can talk a little bit about whether
she does have a reason, which is to try to win the election.
I mean,
I mean that's a pretty good big reason.
She does have that going.
But even if you
whether-
the CNN thing was still pretty.
Right, because it's disputed. He says one thing, she says another. There are two people in the room. So you can't, as a journalist, pick sides and pretend to be neutral and unbiased and just say, no, I'm going to go with her, even though there's nothing to back up her account versus his account.
So should they have asked a follow-up question to make Bernie have more to say about it? Yes, I think that's true.
I think both, honestly. They both should have had some follow-up questions.
Shouldn't have to say what he actually said, because that's part of the question is for him to come out and say, I don't think a woman can win. That doesn't sound like anything he said in the past. It seems way mischaracterized. So I would want to hear from her, okay, specifically what did he say?
But not coming out and saying it. She's talking about a private conversation. If we're having a private conversation about what we should have learned from 2016 and what we should do in 2018, I think it stands to reason that he might say something like that when he believes that he's having a confidential conversation.
So, Will, I saw you looking skeptical at this. What do you think?
Yeah, a couple things. One, Abby Phillips, I think this is her first debate. I sense some nervousness just in the way she was reading the questions. So I actually don't think she intended to do what people think she did.
You're
I think
very
she's gonna,
nice.
I'm serious. I
felt
don't.
very intense.
No. I mean, she said, well, because she had her questions written down. Bernie said, I didn't do it. I think she maybe wasn't prepared for that, and she asked the next question. But regardless of that, I remember trying to convince my mentor, who had worked in politics for a long time, that a black man can be president, and Barack Obama. And I can tell you how many people said that's never going to happen in my lifetime. So I actually don't think I don't know whether he said it or not. I take Bernie at his word. I think you're right. They should have asked a follow-up question. But I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that someone had a conversation privately and said, look, this sexist country is not going to elect a woman president. And having that conversation. And I don't think that means that he would be sexist.
Right.
What do you think of the move by Warren's camp to leak those details? I mean, this is a private conversation.
Right.
They're supposedly friends and allies.
I think that was wrong.
Him as sexist,
I think that was wrong.
Really
and to Kenesha's point, if it was a private conversation, even if he did say it, I don't know if he did, it was wrong to do that, and it was obviously for political gain. So I don't think that I don't think that was a good move.
Right. So what did you make of this, Inez, particularly the media piece?
Well, I'm the opposite. Perhaps I don't believe her. I think she has a track record of twisting stories in her past to always make herself into a victim, and I think that that's what she's doing here. I think she saw that she is struggling a little bit in a way that a month ago people were calling her a front runner. They're no longer calling her that, and I think this was her big play. And honestly, I think this was kind of a mistake on Bernie's part during this debate. I think generally he did well, and you know that I'm not a Bernie fan, but I'm a conservative, so I say this is your guys' decision-making process here. But I think he made a mistake not hitting her in the same way that he made a mistake not going after Hillary Clinton's emails in the primary in 2016. This was his moment to actually, show some of that fire, that he's willing to not always be deferential and nice to other candidates on the stage with him. And I think when that, to your point about the media, when those clips get played over the next 3 days, he's going to look weak in those clips, even if he had an overall stronger debate. And I think that was a mistake on his part.
I thought his response was good, Andrew, and I think it's very hard because the other danger, he goes too hard, and then you have all the media say, oh, he was so mean, and he was mansplaining, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's a very hard situation that he was put in. I thought he handled it fairly well.
Look, I would not have started that off the way Bernie did. I would not have said that he didn't say it. First of all, I think there is clearly a disagreement between the two candidates.
Yeah.
I think he could have acknowledged there's a disagreement on what happened and then pivot to his second part of his answer, which was defending his record of always standing up for women, advocating for women, and mentioning that Hillary Clinton got 3 million more votes than Donald Trump. And I thought that was absolutely
strong. But if he didn't say it, doesn't he have to be clear?
Look, I think that this is... If we are having a conversation, all of us here are strategists. If we want to talk about sexism in the country, right, in our everyday lives, women run into sexism in their careers every day.
Yeah, but here's
so
the weird
absolutely there is sexism in this presidential race, and absolutely that is a conversation that I could see two people having. That doesn't mean that a woman can't win, but absolutely that's something that Elizabeth Warren is going to face.
But is there a problem having that conversation? I mean,
No, I think it's something that needs to be had.
That's different than saying a woman can't win. But
He may have said that.
On a 2016, some of the biggest feminists talked about the sexism that Hillary Clinton faced.
Absolutely. Sure.
That were a barrier to her winning the White House. So, and you had Joe Biden also saying something, that I thought was not appropriate, where he basically was like, well, Hillary had sexism, I'm not going to have that, so that's why you should pick me. Like, he came out and said the quiet part out loud.
He said that.
And no one went after him for that. But, I think Elizabeth Warren and her team have done a tremendous disservice to having an honest conversation about the realities of being a woman in politics by completely weaponizing it to try to smear Senator Sanders for Warren's benefit. Kanisha?
I think that we haven't had a conversation yet about how the stage was white. And I think that if there was to be a way to have this conversation, I think she could have been and would have been well positioned to talk about the whiteness of the stage.
Yeah.
And in thinking about how the stage is not all white men, she could have had this conversation about gender. And so is it possible to have this conversation where she kind of lifts herself up and talks about this wonderful moment for women? Sure. Did she have to do it this way? I don't think so.
Right. Yeah.
Andrew, let me ask you, because this always, I do think this conversation is important. I think it needs to be had, et cetera. There's never a mention of the fact that Bernie Sanders would be the first Jewish president. That seems to not be important to anyone. I mean, do you think that's something that should be discussed? Do you think that he faces barriers because of his identity? What's your view on that?
Sure. I mean, I think that anti-Semitism in this country is on a rise. Around the world, it's on the rise. So absolutely, I think that would be a barrier that Bernie Sanders would face. Would I love there to be a first Jewish president? Absolutely. But I also think that what you're seeing with both Warren and Sanders is they're not backing down. They're fighting through whatever challenges they have. Elizabeth Warren, yes, she's going to face sexism. She's facing it right now. She's facing it if she's the nominee. And she's not saying, I'm just going to give up. She's fighting through. Bernie Sanders has faced ageism. He's faced, I'm sure he's faced in different campaign stops, anti-Semitism, and he's pushing through. That's what I think is fascinating about these two candidates. I actually think this is really petty for our party to be getting in this squabble. It doesn't.
No.
And it doesn't,
There's one team that started this squabble. Let's just be clear.
Let's also focus on Biden here, because let's talk about this, Will. Is that, generally the consensus from all analysts tonight is that Biden had a pretty good night. But the message itself, touting TPP, that end campaign, I'm sure you heard me talking about this earlier, it seemed like a total redux of the Hillary Clinton campaign. I do not think that is an effective strategy that you can run against Trump in the general election after it has already failed.
Right. He's doubling down on what he's always said. Anybody but Trump, Obama 2.0. That's his strategy.
But it's more like Hillary 2.0.
Yeah, Hillary 2.0.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it may be Obama 1.5, Hillary 2.0. And don't forget
Obama maybe 0.5.
Right,
really.
right. When he needs to say, he picked me.
Yes.
But it's that kind of middle of the road, and he tried to. One thing he did do well tonight, I think he's had a couple of good debates in a row. I was out in L.A. He's just holding strong. He's sticking to not making mistakes. It's that I have a broad coalition. Black people like me. Obama got me. Things were a lot better. Yeah. Trump is crazy.
Yeah.
And don't you just want to be normal? And I do think that appeals to people.
There's some people
now,
who want
whether he can win and beat Trump with it, that is a question. I know where you feel how you feel on that, but they're all in on that. They push the chips in, and they think that's going to get them to the nomination.
Right. What did you think, Ines?
To this question of whether this will be another change outsider election or it'll be a return to normalcy, I think none of us know for sure. Certainly a lot of us were wrong in 2016, but to me, the answer to that question seems obvious, right? It's that the American people on the left and the right are not happy with the way the last 30 to 35 years have gone, period. And that's why you see consistently high numbers of people, either pluralities or outright majorities in this country, saying burn it all down, burn all the institutions institutions down, kick everybody out of Washington, drain the swamp. All of those things resonate. And I actually think the ability of Joe Biden to win a general election is overestimated, and somebody like Bernie Sanders is underestimated. And again, not a fan of the guy, but I absolutely think that he would be a viable 2020 candidate, perhaps a better 2020 candidate for Democrats in terms of the election than Joe Biden, because I still don't think this is going to be the return to normalcy. I just don't think that that's where the mood of the electorate is.
It's funny, Inez, because New York Times, I mean, it just comes out with a story saying the Trump campaign internally is like, well, you know, Bernie might put up a pretty good fight in Michigan. He could put up a fight in Wisconsin and a lot of other states that they hadn't necessarily had to think about, even in Maine.
There's
Andrew,
polling also him outperforming Joe Biden with independents.
Right.
It's very counter to the sort of typical Washington narrative.
But no, one thing I want to hear from you is this: why do I not hear that from Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders about Joe Biden? Elizabeth Warren seems completely incapable of going after Joe Biden in the same way that she's gone after Sanders. And that's frankly mystifying to me, because as somebody whose entire campaign, the crux of this campaign is about banks, and particularly on bankruptcy, with Biden was the person who pushed that through in 2005, and then corruption, the son on a Ukrainian gas company, I don't hear a word from her on that.
Look, I'm surprised that we haven't seen more throughout the series of debates on credit cards, on bankruptcy, on these issues where Biden and Warren disagree. But what Warren was doing tonight, I think it came off really well, is she remained calm, cool, and collective, right? And she did not get flustered.
So
she
afterwards.
did not get caught up. Well, afterwards isn't on tape, so I mean,
No, it is on tape.
Well, it's on tape, but it's not live, and the millions of people have shut it off. But the reality is, and I think she has a right to be upset with Bernie Sanders, regardless if we disagree or agree on that. But I also think Joe Biden is the person who benefited from that squabble over the last 48 hours here and on stage tonight. He's going to be the person and we've seen the fighting over the last 6 debates. The people who are fighting don't do better in the polls.
Well, let me ask you, that's actually not always true. Pete rose in the polls by taking on Warren.
That wasn't really a fight. That was like when he went after Beto and he rose. And he also went after Warren. That's part of what really damaged her and took her out of that front-runner position where she was even challenging Joe Biden. How did you think he did tonight? Because we haven't even really talked about him. He needed to make some moves. It seems like he's falling in the polls. I made the argument that the media loved Warren's appearance tonight. I think she may take some of his voters back. Yeah. I didn't think this. I think really he was one of the losers of the night, honestly.
I agree with you about that. I think he was just kind of okay.
Yeah.
And I was surprised that I thought Amy Klobuchar did a better job than he did, frankly, because she had more time to speak. But I thought he was just okay. And I think for this to work, he has to be better than just okay. He has to be Joe Biden plus some energy, plus some enthusiasm. And I don't think he brings that.
What do you think, Inez?
So I think that because Joe Biden did okay, this is a pretty good debate for him. It's the difference between where he is in the polls and Klobuchar is, right? I think this debate, I think the biggest missed opportunity, even though, again, I think that Bernie did a good job in this debate for a Democratic electorate, the biggest missed opportunity for him was to knock out Elizabeth Warren in that exchange. If he had done that, I would see this as much more moving towards a two-person race. And to the extent that it's not moving towards a two-person race, I think the person who benefits is Biden, because Biden just needs to stay where he is for the most part. And I was not saying this a month ago or 3. I thought that his support would crumble. But right now, I think he's looking like a lot of this fighting is in between other candidates is going to have him coast to a nomination to a party that I don't think he represents any longer.
So that's the interesting thing, Will, is that we did not see Biden get knocked on his heels. No candidate was able to prosecute an effective case against him. They can contrast, but prosecute means to put somebody on their heels, make them answer. There was not a single forceful moment.
Well, when the prosecutor did go at him, saw a momentary bump, Kamala Harris, and then a dip. And
the only time he's ever been knocked down. Right.
The other thing, I think, why Joe's strategy, of which I've said is the hold-on strategy, and now with this uncertainty with Iran and this in potentially being a wartime president, that was something. The first 30, 40 minutes of the debate, all foreign policy. Warren was completely exposed as having like no real plan, in my view, on any of that. Klobuchar was very strong on that point. I mean, you don't have to agree with her, but she knew what she wanted to do, and I think that's where if we're in wartime, whether you like Joe Biden or not, people have confidence that he's going to be directive. And I think if he's the nominee, that could help him. So we'll see where that plays. That's a lot of uncertainty.
No, you're right, because we've actually seen
Yeah.
polling saying he's the highest and most trusted whenever it comes to foreign policy amongst
It's
the
the area
Democratic electorate.
where he has the biggest edge. I mean,
Right.
Sanders is most trusted on healthcare, climate change,
Right.
on the economy. They're roughly tied, and Biden has the biggest edge on foreign policy. Even though, in my view, his judgment is highly suspect in that area. But I agree with you that Sanders' team has been trying to make that case, but I don't think Sanders, who had a number of opportunities,
No, he didn't do that well
they
either.
came back to him on it. They
Yeah.
gave him another chance to call Biden
But
out
you
for
guys-
his lies, and he really didn't
You
do it.
brought this up earlier on an earlier panel, right? And I think it was with Brianna. How many times were there stories over the last few days previewing the fight that was going to be tonight, Biden versus Sanders? They're going to go at it. It was a dud. I mean, I walked around my kitchen and started doing dishes at some point to this thing. It was slow. And I was surprised that we did not see more fight from a wide variety of the candidates.
So let me ask you all this. Look, this is the last debate before Iowa. It was 20 days away, which in politics is an eternity on the one hand. On the other hand, impeachment starts next week. And you know how the media is going to be wall to wall. And I know we hear, oh, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. No, you can't. It's going to be wall to wall impeachment. So who, Kanisha, does that ultimately benefit? I mean, essentially, if you wanted to surge, if you wanted to launch an attack on your opponent, if you wanted to shake things up, this week was in some ways your last chance to do it. Yeah. So if you lock in the race at this moment, what does that mean?
I can't believe I'm about to say this, but I think probably Mayor Pete has the most to stand from the impeachment trial happening, because he has the opportunity to talk about all the other things. And so potentially we can walk and chew
be on
gum
the ground, right?
And be on the ground in Iowa. And so if we're just talking about winning in Iowa, I think that he probably has the most to win, because he won't be caught up in kind of statements about past impeachments, this current impeachment, having to be there and be present for that. And so
Your
I'd be
son
interested.
being in a Ukrainian gas company.
I love that.
Yeah. I do. Yeah.
I'm shocked that consistently not only the media is letting Biden off on this, but the other candidates are. Like to your point, I think that's why I'm increasingly in the camp he's going to coast to this, even though, again, I don't think he's representative of the Democratic Party in 2020. But if nobody is willing to take on that mantle and actually go after him on some of these things where he's weak, then he'll just coast that nomination. You can bet and you can guarantee that Donald Trump will go after him on those things. And he will paint him
And that's part of the
as
electability.
the establishment candidate who's going to return to Washington after spending decades in Washington. And I think that is going to be something that Trump can win on and win.
So let's end with these. Winners and losers. Broadly, what did you think?
What's going to change on the debate?
I think Biden continues to slowly rise methodically. I think Warren and Buttigieg drop. I think Sanders holds strong. I think that's a snapshot. I think the impeachment will suck up all the air. I don't think you're going to see. You'll have some organizational gains potentially from Pete in Iowa and New Hampshire, but I think that's where it's going to be. And to that, I just have to say something on this point. Go after his son, Joe Biden's son, on Burisma and all that. The emoluments violator in chief every 2 seconds since he took office. I think that's a great
he's not
debate
running
to have.
on
Yeah, but you guys impeached him on. You guys impeached him.
Well, rightfully so, but
Ukraine.
I don't think that's going to go. I think that's a debate that people will see through.
Yeah.
But
We'll see.
They didn't see through it with Hillary Clinton. So what do you think, Andrew?
I think that the field teams in Iowa are ready to go. And that's what this is going to come down to the next 20 days. That's what Elizabeth Warren is banking on here. She
Spent
had
a lot of money on
She had the earliest field organizers in that state. She's in every county, up and down, whether it's rural or urban or suburban. And that's going to be a test. Does that field game that she's put together really come through for her? Does the volunteer operation for Bernie Sanders come through for him? And does Biden's endorsements come through for him? Because we know he doesn't have the same type of field game as others. So I think we are done with the debates. We are done talking. This is the final 3-week sprint, and this is going to be a field margin game in Iowa.
Yeah, I think that's right. What do you think,
Kanisha?
Kanisha?
I agree. I think that one of the folks that we kind of don't talk about because she doesn't have the polling numbers is Amy Klobuchar. Full disclosure, I hadn't been thinking about her deeply before today. And I think that she has the potential to kind of sneak in and have us think about her as the consensus candidate. And so to the extent that we are getting tired of what's happening and these bickering things, I think that she has the opportunity to kind of sneak in. And so I think she's one to watch. In terms of losers, I think that Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, by engaging in this thing about personalities and did you lie and did the script and all of this kind of stuff, I think hurt them today.
What do you think, Ines?
So I've already said that I think Bernie Sanders lost an opportunity here. I think the big winner of this debate is Biden, not because he won the debate, but only because he's in a position where he doesn't have to win a debate. And I think Bernie had an opportunity to really knock out some rivals and make himself the primary alternative to Joe Biden. And I think that if he becomes that, he has a strong chance of taking the nomination. Yeah. And I think he lost that opportunity in this debate.
See, I'm going to disagree. I made the case earlier this week that Bernie Sanders, for the first time, and I haven't said this before, is in a position to win. He's in the position in Iowa. He's in the position in New Hampshire. I don't know that he necessarily needed to turn the race upside down in order to be in that position still to win as we come down to the wire. Look, ultimately, yes, Joe Biden holding on to that support. There's zero energy there for him. And I have to think that when you're trying to get voters to come out to the polls, caucus for you and all of that, he doesn't have that organization on the ground, doesn't have the enthusiasm. I just don't see how that comes together for him ultimately in Iowa. And then that can really change the game if you've got a campaign that is organized, that is energized, that shows that momentum. So I would say that Bernie Sanders is still in a very strong position.
Yeah, and from my perspective, it's kind of in the same boat, which is that Bernie was kind of on that rise. He was cresting really right up before all this stuff started to happen. Impeachment's about to suck all the air out of the wind. Generally, he is underpolled. The polls are not able to capture, I think, 1/4 of the people who are going to caucus for him, according to his own campaign. I don't know if this, I'm going to assume it's true because I don't think they'd lie about it, is that they are new entrants into the process. That's a lot like what the Obama coalition was able to bring through and smash Iowa and surprise everybody there. So the momentum is on his side, but Biden did very, very well tonight. It's a two-person race, a true two-person race, and while the early state advantage goes to Sanders, Biden, if he can continue to do this, and if Sanders just completely lacks the ability to truly kind of twist the knife into Biden, then he's going to make it a 50-50 chance of him being able to win or lose when he could have made it 75-25 and really gone for the win.
Don't underestimate the way that this attack from Warren has galvanized Bernie Sanders supporters. They had their biggest fundraising. They had the biggest fundraising night of any debate so far.
I do think Elizabeth got what she wanted, and she wanted the 1-2 step on the women thing. Her best answer of the night was the answer after that drama when she talked about why a woman could and should be president. She wanted to get to that.
But I don't think that takes on a Bernie.
Applause while she was still talking of anyone's answer in the entire night.
I wouldn't be surprised if she also raised a record amount of money.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
I really do.
I don't think
this
that.
hardened their supporters. No one from either of their camps left. It depends. Did they win anyone else? I'm not sure. And who did it benefit? Maybe a Biden.
Yeah, I think, and I think ultimately, like I said, I think she's not winning Sanders supporter. This did not win over one single Sanders supporter. No. However, I think she could have eaten into some of Pete's support. Right. That is the movement that I would expect to see come out of
She'll have a little bit more of a hardening. Okay, guys, no, we can't. We got to go. Sorry.
Thank you guys so much. We appreciate you all.
Thanks, guys.
The debate coverage fun does not end here, though. Joining us tomorrow on Rising, we will have Warren Surrogate and Progressive Change Campaign Committee's Adam Green, Director of Communications for Trump 2020 Tim Murtaugh, and the Young Turks Cenk Uygur. They're all going to share their debate night takes.
I challenge anyone on cable to have that lineup, so we hope you enjoyed your live debate coverage. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a good night. We're going to see you guys tomorrow on Rising.
Have a great night, guys.